Does fiction impact reality? Well, yeah, of course it does. People fight about this all the time, but it's pretty clear cut, or at least should be. Actually, this conversation has been around for a long, long time, dating back to the days of D&D and satanic rituals in basements. Surely even further back than that. The issue with the does fiction impact reality conversation, and likely many conversations, is the refusal to engage with the point. The way the conversation is packaged immediately makes people hostile to the point and presents an immediate refusal to engage, or to engage inherently dishonestly to protect their worldview. It's become deeply intertwined with the concept of video games making people violent, a thoroughly debunked and well-studied topic. So to suppose that fiction or art in general can have an impact on the real world, well, you must be as delusional as the Catholic moms of the 90s fearing the effects of Grand Theft Auto on their children. The fact of the matter is, however, that art can influence real life. It's just more complex than loading up Doom and wanting to pick up a shotgun and go to town. So, what do people actually mean when they talk about fiction impacting reality? The way I like to think about art is that in some respects, art can serve as a snapshot in time. The events happening at that time, the cultural beliefs of that era, the ongoing political situation. I've been watching The Sopranos, and obviously as a show from the late 90s and early 2000s, it reflects that cultural period of the New Jersey area and America at large. The starkly different gender norms, the much different attitude around slurs and bigotry, the state of crime during the surge of the war on drugs, and obviously pre-9/11 America. The question might become, well, how does The Sopranos or other art like it end up impacting reality? Just to be clear, I don't think 1999 America was exactly like The Sopranos. I'm sure everyone wasn't running around being mobsters and having the absolute worst and most hard-to-watch dinner scenes that would put Breaking Bad to shame. I just mean that the time and culture of America at the time of The Sopranos being made was also captured. People, however, reject that this idea can lead to consequences, good or bad. The Catcher in the Rye being a prominent example from English class many of you might have ignored. A story made by a man who returned from World War II, and that trauma is reflected through the book and the experiences of the protagonist, a boy afraid of the adult world and what it means to grow up. Of course, that's a very simplified line about the book, but it's today known as one of the most influential English novels in history. It's a book that spoke primarily to the teenagers that read it. They ended up relating strongly to it, and it made them feel seen. Now, you can see that kind of phenomenon all the time today. Fiction reaching out and grabbing kids, teenagers, adults, and the elderly alike. Nobody ever really seems to take issue with the line, "This piece of art saved me." People in a dark place that feel they have nothing to grasp for, having something inspiring come down and move them to tears, to move them to keep going. People will ignore, however, that fiction and art can affect people in other ways, that it can inform social roles and ideas. Elected Republicans actually understand this quite well, as they try to ban things that seemingly push values that they disagree with, like Catcher in the Rye, or Handmaid's Tale, or all kinds of anime and manga. You can find out more about this in a video I recently made, though. When you grow up in the 60s and 70s and you have every single thing around you reinforcing an idea, it's naturally going to take hold in your mind. For example, if you see your mom stay at home and take care of the kids while your dad goes out to work, then you hear and see other kids' families doing the same thing. Then you go home and read books where people have the same familial structure, or you turn on the TV and you see the exact same thing. That's going to form an idea in your head that this is how family should be. It's normal. Unless you're some 40-year-old guy isekai'd into this kid's body, you're not going to immediately come to the conclusion that, hey, families can be of all kinds of different things. You aren't born with objectively correct positions. Oftentimes you get them by seeing things around you, seeing your family unit, seeing others, your friends, your lovers, the media you consume, and so much more. You might not be able to even conceive of a life like Holden's in The Catcher in the Rye until you read about it and get to see what things can be like for other people. As The Impact of Literature on Society, How Books Shape Our Perspectives and Values puts it, we step into the shoes of characters from different walks of life, gaining empathy and understanding for their struggles and triumphs. Literature exposes us to a range of perspectives and challenges our preconceived notions, fostering open-mindedness and critical thinking. Some might have had that experience opening Catcher in the Rye and not being a teenager. And that's how teenagers felt so inspired or at least spoken to by the book. And to a lot of people, that's scary. How it was many, many years ago was that you were completely insulated from other ideas, but now that we're in or even long past the information age, all of these perspectives, for better or for worse, are available at all times. Out of fear, a lot of people would try to censor those ideas, banning them from schools or libraries, even states or even countries. Most people, however, recognize that when you're banning written word, you're the bad guy, so it's not a particularly popular position anymore. So instead of the censorship age, we now live in the denial age. You'll see a lot of right-wing influencers engage in this type of rhetoric, a rhetoric of a multitude of contradictions. First, they're the bastions of free speech. They want to be able to say whatever they want, no matter what. Second, art isn't that deep. It exists only for entertainment. It has no opportunity to impact hearts and minds. And no, it's definitely not a form of speech. Third, wokeism is ruining everything and needs to be destroyed. Now, they don't usually, and I say usually because there are fringe cases, claim it should be censored legally. Instead, what they do is move to suppress. whether it be through harassment, doxing, or so on and so forth, so that the wokies leave the space. I'm not going to pull out many specific examples here. One, because I don't feel like watching reactionary anime YouTubers for hours just to get it together. But two, I'm not trying to pick fights with anyone in particular. Realistically, when you make as much content as some of these other creators do, or even as much as I do, there are bound to be contradictions slipped in at some point. We're humans, people make mistakes or change their minds, it is what it is. I'm not bringing up these things as a gotcha, I'm really bringing up the inconsistency in the position. Rev says Desu is a very popular right-wing anime creator, though maybe calling him an anime creator isn't exactly accurate these days because he's more centered on general political topics than just primarily anime these days, but that's what people know him from. Rev, like many people in the anime space, is also active in the discourse that seems to exist outside of space and time about lolly. Now, I'm trying to cover Rev's opinion as fairly as I can here, and apologies if I make a mistake about that. From what I can tell, Rev says it's fine to be weirded out by it, but ultimately, they are drawn characters, and regularly falls back on, quote, they are just drawings, end quote. Personally, I don't really have a strong opinion on the whole lolly conversation. On its surface, the art of little kids, especially in sexual situations, is pretty fucking uncomfortable, but I also don't dedicate much of my time to thinking about it, so I don't have a well-informed opinion on lolly art and the impact it has on the world. I'm not bringing this up to attack Rev's position on lolly art, but specifically to make his point known on it. They're fake, they're not real, so ultimately nothing wrong really happened. This makes the position that the wokes are infecting anime and video games with their politics a very strange and seemingly contradictory one. If drawings of naked children are, quote, just drawings, then I'm forced to ask why you felt a 16-minute video talking about Angela's face in the Silent Hill 2 remake and talking about inclusion in video games was really necessary. In this video, Rev goes on to talk about the buzzwords of, quote, for a modern audience, end quote, with regards to how the Silent Hill 2 remake team spoke about the game. He interpreted it as, we are making the game woke, and used Angela's new model as a jumping-off point for it, which, to be frank, is the worst faith interpretation of their statement possible, and can really only be said to be a result of probably never having touched Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 2 is my favorite game of all time. It's one of the works that really brought me to where I am today, in that I love looking into the deeper meaning of art and fiction. I've been a lurker in Silent Hill community since the days of message boards all the way until now, and contrary to Rev's claims that Bloober is caving to Twitter activist pressure, I've never once, even for a single moment, heard discourse about how Silent Hill 2 should be more woke. The actual meaning behind modern audiences that Bloober talks about is that Silent Hill 2 is really, really old and kind of plays like shit to a lot of people. Fixed camera angles, tank controls, and its admittedly clunky combat are not really appeals to modern gamers. Through its faults, I still very much enjoy the original Silent Hill 2, its dreamlike atmosphere and very jank acting, really evoking a certain feel that the remake fails to capture in my eyes, but also a feel that might not land for modern audiences, specifically what Bloober was talking about. Besides the fact that I'm not really sure Rev knows anything about Silent Hill, even if Bloober were making Silent Hill more woke or whatever, or were adding more inclusive terminology to the game, or making Angela trans or whatever the fuck people were talking about, aren't they just 3D models? What's the problem? They aren't real, so what's the issue? The contradiction is that the woke virus is planting its seeds in video games, and Japan shouldn't cater to Western audiences because Japan's products should stay away from Western culture, because they don't want those values implanted in other people. However, there can be absolutely nothing communicated by drawings of naked little girls. They're just drawings, and there's no harm done whatsoever. Again, for clarification, I'm not saying there is or is not harm in lolly art, because I simply do not know the answer. But the two positions, regardless, are contradictory. Rev also claimed that Silent Hill 2 would completely flop because of this modern audience catering. Oops, I guess that didn't work out. He also claimed, and still claims, that catering to the wokes is why Assassin's Creed Shadows would and has failed, which I have no idea how to read other than him blatantly ignoring that it had 3 million players in the first week, and was one of the best-selling games of 2025 so far, unless he thinks that's just a lie. If fake things like art or fiction had absolutely zero impact on the world or the way we approach things, what would be the problem with video games and anime trying to be more inclusive? I think people, even implicitly, understand that art and culture is a way of expressing soft power. Art is capable of changing socio-political landscapes because the way people approach it is fundamentally different. As Isabella Gold wrote in their essay, Negotiating Tradition, The Soft Power of Art, stories in fiction involve suspending disbelief, and people do not immediately begin to pick apart, doubt, and criticize as one does with an argument. Stories, television shows, and art all contain arguments as well, but command the viewer to suspend disbelief, thus getting their message across more powerfully. For those that don't know, soft power is a term coined by, I believe, Joseph Nye, that refers to the opposite of hard power. So instead of getting what you want through violent or forceful means, you shape the preferences of others. This can be seen through American media being partly responsible as to why English is considered the global lingua franca, or through Italian cuisine, or notably, cool Japan. Japan's method of rehabilitating its image after World War II and losing the capability of enacting hard power whatsoever. What people do when they tell people to keep wokeness out of video games isn't a logically consistent position, but more so to them, consciously or unconsciously, advocating for soft power that more aligns with their values. One of the most powerful tools in the anti-reality toolbox is violent video games. It's something a lot of people engage in. Shit, I know I do too. Despite claims of increased aggression due to them, I feel pretty fine. It doesn't really seem to make me want to go kill people, and that seeming contradiction has to blow a hole in the idea that fiction can impact reality, but there is more to violent video game aggression than meets the eye. Not to say it's real, because it isn't. It's a bad case of people assuming correlation equals causation when that isn't the case. There are no studies that I can find that sufficiently indicate that violent video games lead to heightened aggression in individuals. What I can find pretty reliably, however, is that individuals with higher levels of aggression tend to engage more with violent video games. Violent video games are also generally, not always, more on the competitive side, which can heighten tensions even more. So it's not that violent video games make people violent, it's that aggressive people might gravitate more towards them, and have their aggressive traits or anger issues flared up by them. If you're just your average person who keeps their anger in check and doesn't have 300 Monster Energy cans on your desk, it's probably going to be fine. But people don't know this because they don't look into it. Instead, they go to YouTubers with no credentials, like Rev, like Chibi, like Asmongold, like me, to get their viewpoints. Because in the modern day, expertise is dead. A quote from Isaac Asimov states, "There is a cult of ignorance in the United States, and there always has been. The strain of anti-intellectualism has been a constant thread winding its way through our political and cultural life, nurtured by a false notion that democracy means that my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge. The modern-day American, and probably other places in the world, they're uniquely ignorant, and as Thomas Nichols put it, we wield ignorance as a virtue to insulate our fragile egos from ever being told we're wrong. It becomes unfounded arrogance, the outrage of an increasingly narcissistic culture that cannot endure even the slightest hint of inequality of any kind. We resist the conclusion of admitting there are limits to our knowledge, because it undermines our sense of independence and autonomy." Nichols' book, The Death of Expertise, touches on a lot of topics like this one, specifically about how, in this information age, people are far smarter than they were in the 1920s, but part of the issue is that everyone has their own radio station now, and every opinion is worth the same due to that availability of information. Did you know, in 2014, during the Ukrainian Revolution and the ongoing battle between Russia, the less Americans knew about Ukraine and the conflict, like the people who couldn't point to Ukraine on the map, were the most enthusiastic about intervening in the battle. Did you know, Americans believe 25% of the budget is being given away as foreign aid. In reality, it's less than 0.75% of the budget. There is a growing problem in today's internet age, which some consider to be a post-truth era. What matters not is how professionally trained or how well-read you are, but how strongly you hold those opinions, indulging in a limitless supply of facts, treating them as equivalent to knowledge or ability. Part of the issue is that people don't research. They find pages that give them the answers they like with the least amount of effort in the shortest amount of time, and yes, my channel is likely no exception. Just for people more closely aligned to my political values, as people all around the world confuse the presence of an article, video, or factoid with the plausibility of an argument, an issue exacerbated by social media algorithms that basically serve to radicalize you. The paper, How Social Media Algorithms Potentially Reinforce Radical Views, talks about UGT, or Uses and Gratification Theory, which postulates that audiences are not merely passive absorbers of media content, instead they are active agents, strategically selecting media sources that best cater to their individual needs and desires. People leverage algorithms to personalize and curate content that resonates with users' existing beliefs, meeting their informational needs and reinforcing social identity. By engaging and sharing radical content, they also meet their need for social interaction and community. The argument and contradictions about fiction having impacts on reality is an issue much more deeply rooted than it might seem. It's an argument that specifically targets those who might feel most impacted by it. As evangelicals falsely claim that their hobbies are leading them to violence, they use this patently false argument and bundle it together with more anti-intellectual arguments about how art doesn't have anything to say about the world, or it's not that deep, or the curtains are just blue. YouTube, Twitter, and other websites I probably can't think of have creators that will peddle objectively false information, whether it be intentional or not, or contradictory arguments that will be accepted without a second thought, because after they bring you in talking about how crazy people on Twitter sound, they begin to fulfill the desire for information, for news, for community, becoming something you engage in daily, and algorithms create filter bubbles where users are exposed to content that aligns with their existing views, and the viral nature of content sharing contributes to normalization of ideas as radical thoughts gain traction and influence vulnerable individuals. Now, elephant in the room. Since I spoke about Rev in this video, do I think he's doing all this on purpose? I don't know. I don't know him. If I had to guess, probably not. This is shit that, like, terrorist groups take advantage of, and I'm not trying to equate those two necessarily, more so painting a picture of how one thing can lead to another. And algorithms can take you straight down into radicalization. A user can consume something, and the algorithm can recommend similar content to them, In such a setting, a user can stumble to more radical materials without deliberately seeking it, and they can comment, share, or like, which makes the radicalization process interactive and participatory. Right-wing influencers have rallied around the talking point about how things are just drawings or just video games, and have lured in young, vulnerable people before providing them with the contradictory position that their drawings and video games are being invaded. It's actually something straight out of Fascism 101. The opponent is both weak and strong through a continuous shifting of rhetorical focus. Wokeism is simultaneously invading our games, invading Japan, and stamping out the nuclear family by portraying gay families, but also, go woke, go broke. All of woke media is a failure, Japan hates wokeism, and actually, fiction doesn't impact reality. I used a term earlier, post-truth era. Specifically, it refers to the information age, and how truth no longer matters in favor of personal narratives. I find it to be an interesting term, however, I also think there are interesting counter-arguments to it. Realistically, we've always lived in a post-truth world, but these days, choosing your own truth is easier than ever. Perhaps rather than post-truth, we might rather live in a personal truth or subjective truth world. And in this world, while liberals obsess over market metrics, the new populists built growing movements by exploiting unequivocal values centered around patriotism, community, and traditional identities. Nova is a science fiction novel written by Samuel Delany that was published in 1968, a novel that touches deeply on racial divides and features a black protagonist. Delany had trouble initially publishing this novel, and was told that people would have a hard time relating to a black protagonist. It was assumed to be easier to relate to literal alien characters than to a black person. And that goes to show you the fear of empathy that people have with art. The fear of having to step into someone else's shoes to see how they might live. Here is an interview from Nichelle Nichols, an American actor who exploded in popularity because of her work on Star Trek and things that she heard when she met Martin Luther King.
I never got that far. I said, well, I'm leaving Star Trek. He said, you cannot. You cannot. I was taken aback, and I just looked at him. He said, for the first time on television, we will be seen as we should be seen every day, as intelligent, quality, beautiful people who can sing, dance, but who can go into space, who can be lawyers, who can be teachers, who can be professors, who are in this day, and yet you don't see it on television until now. I just stood there, realizing every word that he was saying was the truth. And at that moment, the world tilted for me.
Does fiction impact reality? Undeniably. Perhaps not in the way some people might imagine it. And this question serves as the entry point to radical views. To dismiss culture, to dismiss the impact of soft power, to dismiss hundreds of years of written record, to blindly follow YouTube mouthpieces, to engage in us versus them mentality, and to abandon research and curiosity. Rev, if you happen to watch or hear about this video, I mean absolutely no ill will from it, and apologies if that felt like my intention. This isn't to serve as a call-out video or anything of that nature, more so to talk about the historic impact of art, the rise of anti-intellectualism, and the danger that algorithms could pose. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe for more. You can also check the description down below to become a member, which gives you benefits like early videos, membership badges, and cool custom emotes. You can join the Discord where we talk about ReZero, Kagurabachi, Jujutsu Kaisen, and all kind of stuff. Additionally, you can go to the channel store and pick up some awesome stickers made by our channel artist, so you can carry the power of Graphia with you on your water bottle. That's about it though. Thank you for watching. See ya.